Hi. So here we are with the acceptance and commitment therapy introduction. And I sort of promised in a whimsical way that I was going to try to teach you to call this ACT. So repeat after me: act, 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 act. I will probably do that again in the webinar, and I will, in a kindly way, correct the first three people who call it ACT, which is a perfectly understandable way to pronounce these three letters. And there's all kinds of things that do it that way. There's a contemporary theater. There's lots of other acronyms with these letters, but the ACT folks are really kind of fierce about it, and so I don't want you to look foolish if you are in the circles where somebody is using the term ACT. All right, so I want to kind of start to tell you about some of the things that intrigue me the most about this third wave behavioral treatment. So actually, let's start riffing on the name itself, and kind of start to place that in the context of what the treatment's about and what possible therapeutic insights and clinical moves it could give you as you work with your clients. So there's a thing called the Hexaflex. It's a sort of a six-sided figure that is used commonly to kind of lay out the theory of ACT. And so it kind of uses the word acceptance over here in this spot, and it has commitment down here. Or actually, we modify it to call it committed action here. All right. So there's your acceptance and commitment. So commitment in service of what? And I've mentioned that this, like the effectiveness how skill in DBT, the question of where are we trying to go with this? What's the point of this? Is a big part of this. And so the idea of values gives you a sense of the direction that you're trying to take committed action towards. That's where you're headed. You know what, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to come back and just check for a minute, make sure that my values word is on the screen. Yep, that looks like that's going to get up there. Okay, good. So we've got values is kind of where we're headed. Committed action is doing stuff that takes you there. But you know, when we find ourselves trying to do something, heading in a direction that matters to us, we're often kind of thrown into other stuff that arises that makes it difficult to get to where we're trying to go. And so I'm going to start to immediately sort of talk about some of these things. So there's a hexaflex for the positive qualities that we're trying to develop in the therapy and with our clients. And then there is an alternating sort of more symptomatic hexaflex that talks about the things that get in the way of trying to go where we're trying to go. So there's two major things. One from an ACT point of view, and you know, there's all kinds of things in life that keep us from having what we want. But we're focusing on the things within our own psyche, our own behavioral conditioning that get in our own way. And one of those is called experiential avoidance. Now, we've talked about this. We began talking about this when we were looking at the concept of negative reinforcement, and started to kind of poach towards this idea of experiential avoidance when we're sort of trying to get away from some experience that we regard as unpleasant. We often sort of do that by jumping into behaviors that can get us into trouble. I was just talking about that. I'm recording this right after the DBT webinar this morning, and I was talking about the sort of the unrelenting crisis and crisis-generating behavior that occurs with clients who meet criteria for borderline personality disorder. But this is also a characteristic of folks who get into trouble with alcohol or pornography or any number of kinds of things. There's sort of a looping quality to any addictive process in which folks get into stuff that allows them to escape from other aspects of their experience they don't want to have be present. And so experiential avoidance often gets in the way of us heading in the direction of something that matters to us, especially if it's kind of difficult. You see kids who start doing poorly in school because maybe they've got ADD or other kinds of issues that come up. But if they start avoiding doing their homework because it's hard and unpleasant and doesn't come easily to them, pretty soon they're in a loop where things are getting worse and worse and they got more and more to avoid. And so they may well escape into drugs, or there's a lot of, they're starting to develop treatments now for computer addiction behaviors. I sort of had personal experience with one of my children needing to go through a treatment program for kind of getting addicted to online Facebook and gaming and a variety of different things. So any of these things can start to really become problematic. Now, another thing that gets tracked all the time in cognitive behavioral treatments that could get in the way of going where we want to go is limiting beliefs that we may have. I mean, this goes all the way back to Ellis and all of that stuff that we were talking about in the really mostly in the second wave of behaviorism. So believing thoughts that tell us that we can't have what we want, or it's going to be too hard, or whatever. In ACT, this is called cognitive fusion. This is sort of fusion with cognitions, with thoughts. So believing what our thoughts are telling us. Now, we've come across this before. We talked about Byron Katie, who was suggesting that in the 4-question work that we kind of question some of the thoughts that show up. Is that really true? Can I absolutely know that that's true? What's the effect of believing that? Who or what would I be if I didn't believe that? So those techniques that Byron Katie works are very similar to ACT stuff. The sort of the antidote to cognitive fusion is cognitive diffusion. And diffusion is really a kind of a made-up word. It's not diffusion like the chemistry word, which is spelled with an I. But I misspelled, I put too many S's in it. Diffusion is to be able to kind of step back off of thoughts, to see them for what they are instead of what they're saying they are. Thoughts tell you that they are absolute truth. But so in ACT we are not so much arguing with them, but trying to teach folks how to sort of step back into larger awareness and see thoughts for what they are, to see them as thoughts. And we'll be talking about this over the course of the next couple of weeks. The whole idea of fighting with thoughts, as is done in more classical cognitive therapy, is viewed by the ACT community as kind of ineffective. And there have been some studies that indicate that. They've got some data for it. So cognitive fusion, kind of believing thoughts, and cognitive fusion can be in support of experiential avoidance. If we believe a thought like, I can't take this is too much, or I don't want to have this. If we believe that, that really supports the experiential avoidance, which is seen by ACT as really a part of nearly all psychiatric or psychological kind of symptoms. And in this respect, ACT is got data that says it's effective in all kinds of different contexts where we're trying to help people change their behavior. Looking at the role of experiential avoidance and cognitive fusion turns out to be very powerful stuff. So then this actually is going to be something I'm asking you to take a look at in the collaboration section, the thread dialogue stuff. I'm asking you, you may have noticed, to comment on some of your own avoidant experiences if you're courageous enough to write that down, or to talk about it how you see it being problematic in your clients and friends and family members, if that's a little easier. So that's kind of where ACT really starts, well, at least in a sense. Although really you can move around through all the different parts of this, this hexagon or this hexaflex. And actually I kind of started with the committed action and moving to the values. There's a lot of work in ACT in helping people really sort of discover what they're most after. And I'm going to be showing you some exercises over the next couple of weeks for just that. Okay, so we got acceptance and committed action, we got values, we've got cognitive diffusion. The other 2 points on this hexaflex, and incidentally it's called a hexaflex because hexa means 6, and the flex has to do with a sort of a central core value in the middle of all of this is a sense of psychological flexibility. The ability to really respond to whatever's going on in a really effective way, and that often involves being able to kind of change what we're doing, see it, look at things from different angles, and so on. So that's where we get the hexaflex, is picking out the first part of flex, flexibility, and hexa is the 6 stuff. So the other parts of this hexaflex, though, that I think are part of what so calls me to this approach, is that up here at the top, acting almost like a kind of a fulcrum, moving back and forth between acceptance on the one hand and change or committed action. Recall that the fundamental dialectic in DBT was acceptance, action in the direction of change. It's got this same kind of dialectic here drawn up on the board. The fulcrum points in this really turn out to be awareness. So up here is sort of mindfulness of the present moment, sensory experience. So this, like DBT mindfulness, is about kind of what it is that we can really take in through our senses rather than our thoughts. Our thoughts are the cognitive part down here that we may be fused with. So the alternative to kind of being involved with our thoughts is to be involved in what we take in through our senses in the present moment. And this is sort of the ACT definition of mindfulness. Turns out to be present moment with acceptance, with being, rather than being involved with our thoughts, in cognitive diffusion. And then finally there's that which is aware. So there are several different words down here for the mystery of what it is that's noticing. You'll see in one of the readings that I'm having you, this Steve Hayes article about if I'm not my thoughts, then who am I? What he calls this in that writing is observing self. And he actually kind of talks about different kinds of self. There's the kind that's about our thoughts about who we are, all the different things that I could say about myself. There is the sort of description of a present moment. That's another kind of, considered to be another kind of self in ACT. It really corresponds to the describe skill in DBT. And then there's what it is that's actually aware. And so you'll see it called observing self. Self as context is kind of a strange word. Self as perspective taking in a variety of different things. But this really points in the direction of the mystery of what it is that's aware, and Steve Hayes' article about that is really rather nice. And And we'll also be talking in the following week or so, about the way that this concept of self as context or observing self really points in a very Buddhist direction. And there's a videotape online at a YouTube site of me talking with Steve Hayes about kind of the depth of that. And we'll be looking at that in various ways. But it's this concept of observing self that I find really delightful, and part of why I'm as involved with ACT as I am. Because I'm really interested in using these behavioral techniques to push further into the mystery of what it is that observes. And particularly using cognitive diffusion and acceptance techniques to counter some of the obstacles that come up for people in their spiritual practice. So we'll be talking about that more down the line. So let me just kind of write in the symptomatic side of this stuff. So the more instead of mindfulness of the present moment, you'll see people kind of caught in their stories or caught in thoughts. That gets in the way. And down here, people can be caught in thoughts and stories about themselves. So this is sort of self-concept stuff. You'll see self as concept as opposed to self as context. So caught in stories about a self that from a really deep mystical point of view we find to be non-existent. Stories about self. You probably are not going to be able to really read this anyway, but somebody gave me feedback this morning reinforcing my use of diagramming, so I'm going to kind of keep going with that. So, let's see, let me draw in the hexagon part of this. So there's a point up there, and down here, and then over here, and so on. So you got this sort of hexagon, hexaflex thing with flexibility in the middle. So a lot of times you'll see people, instead of being able to kind of actually commit and do stuff, they'll get thrown over here into avoiding action because it's hard or because it conflicts with their ideas about themselves. And so this can end up with sort of a passivity or an impulsiveness that what they actually are doing isn't really tied to a sense of where they're actually trying to go. Trouble with impulsiveness is that, apart from the fact that it can be risky and get us into stuff that really makes our life worse, it being the opposite of impulsiveness is to really be thoughtful, and you kind of ask yourself that question, so what is this, this behavior I'm doing right now, what's this in the service of? Where's that going to take me? Where do I really want it to take me? Up here, people can be really confused about what matters to them. If they are mainly driving down the highway of life, looking in the rearview mirror, trying to get away from a bunch of stuff, they really don't have much of a chance to look at what exit they'd really like to get off on, or where they're trying to go. So experiential avoidance, looking into that rearview mirror and trying to get away from stuff, not a very effective strategy, and it can often lead people to be just very confused about what matters to them. So the opposite of really knowing what your values are might be confusion, or just lack of knowing what you truly want. So it can be sometimes I almost always start with clients by asking them about what it is they're hoping to accomplish in therapy. If some people really don't know, I might get to asking them, well, would you like to know more about what you want? Would you like to have more clarity about what matters to you in your life? And sometimes people will go for that. Now, definitely going to be working on that in the context of doing ACT work. So I think that is going to kind of be it for this intro video. Once again, it's called ACT. Look forward to talking to you some more. Bye-bye.